Alright folks, this is Harris Sultan. I don't think it's a secret anymore, nor is it overly controversial to say that Muslims are not fans of Jews in general. There is a special kind of hatred taught to Muslims about Jews. Why? Well, because the founder of Islam, the self-professed prophet, Muhammad, hated the Jews. Unlike the pagans of Arabia, who made up the majority of the Arab population, the Jews were knowledgeable about their religion and used to challenge Muhammad on his theology of the so-called Abrahamic religions. That's why Muhammad didn't quite like them. So there are many passages in the Quran and Hadith that institutionally tell Muslims to stay away from the Jews. Don't believe me? Let me show you some of these anti-Jewish passages. For example, Quran chapter 5 verse 13. So for the breaking of the covenant, we cursed them and made their hearts hardened. They distort words from their proper place and have forgotten a portion of that of which they were reminded. And you will still observe deceit among them, except a few of them. Not most of them. A few of them are good ones, but the rest... those evil ones. This verse is actually very telling about how Muslims ought to see the Jews. According to Islam, Allah has hardened their hearts because they made up their own scripture and now they're doing all the nasty things you see in the world. It's classic anti-Semitism 101. You see anything wrong in the world? Just blame the Jews. What about this verse? O you who have believed, do not take the Jews and the Christians as allies. They are in fact allies of one another, and whoever is an ally to them among you, then indeed he is one of them. This is why Muslims don't see Jews or Christians or any non-Muslim for that matter as friends. They're not allowed to be your friends, and anyone who tries to befriend you is seen as a traitor. This is why they say this.
أو كرهنا لليهود من منطلق عقيدة. القرآن هو اللي بيدعونا إن احنا نكرههم وما نحبهمش.
لو أن اليهود تركوا لنا فلسطين خلاص يبقوا حبايبنا؟ لا طبعا. عمرهم ما هيبقوا حبايبنا. إطلاقا. عقيدتك في اليهود واحد أنهم كفار، اثنين أنهم أعداء.
Non-believer, a non-Muslim.
Yeah.
We hate him for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reason being is because he's upon kufr.
It is from our religion that we have to hate them for the sake of Allah.
Al-adawa, enmity and hatred, meaning we're enemies. Let's not be around the bush. We don't love each other. We're not on the same page. We are not friends. Does that make sense? We are enemies.
The kuffar. We hate the kuffar for the sake of Allah. Because why? Because they disbelieve in Allah.
Loving the Muslims and hating the non-Muslims.
That's just 2 Quranic verses. Let me share some golden words of the great prophet himself. The hour will not be established until you fight with the Jews, and the stone behind which a Jew will be hiding will say, "Oh Muslim, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him." They are waiting for this war with the Jews in which everyone in the world will turn on the Jews, even the rocks and the trees, because they are the wretched ones, and Muslims are the good guys. I shouldn't be explaining this. Let a Muslim explain this to you.
There will come a time, and we relate the ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that the Muslims and the Jews, they will fight, and there is coming a time where there will be fighting. And he told us, alayhi salatu wassalam, that the inanimate objects will speak on those days. The inanimate object will speak. And this is not anti-Semitic, this is a part of our tradition. We simply relay the hadith and we say that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us that when there is a war going on. There's a war going on. They have drones that say to them, "Oh, so-and-so, there's a Muslim there, press your button and destroy it." So we're simply just turning it around and telling them what our tradition will be at that time. You have your inanimate drones that will speak to you and say to you, "There's a Muslim there." Doesn't matter that it's a hospital and there are dead people and there are injured people and old people. You know what we're going to do? Press a button and bomb it, and there it goes. As for the Muslims at that time, the Prophet ﷺ told us that the trees and the stones will speak and say, "Oh Muslim, behind me there is a Yahudi, come and kill him." These times are coming.
There are tons of these hateful quotes and verses. But let me conclude my point with this hadith. Abuse them with your poems. Bukhari 4123. And this tweet from a Muslim who is a doctor. He says, I'm a Muslim. Daily I treat Jews and I have taken a hypocritical oath. It's not hypocritical. He meant Hippocratic oath. Anyway, that outlines my responsibilities in the Buckingham crew. However, I must admit that if I had the power, I would vanish every Jew. That's just how it is. It's just hate that they are taught from a very young age. And I'm telling you, it's got nothing to do with the existence of Israel. It's been there long before the state of Israel, and it will be there long after Israel is gone. Although I do think that Israel is going to outlast Islam. So now that you understand the institutional and doctrinal hatred for the Jews embedded in Islam and among Muslims, let's have a look at what's happening in Australia right now. I must say that again, this hatred has been there for nearly 1400 years, long before the state of Israel existed. You could remove Israel tomorrow and Muslims would still be subjugating, hating and killing Jews.
مش أعداء عشان يحتلوا فلسطين. وإنما هم أعداء ولو لم يحتلوا شيئا.
نحن نعادي يهود حتى ولو أعادوا إلينا فلسطين لأنهم كفار.
After all, according to their belief, the day of judgment won't come until Muslims start killing Jews. This anti-Jewish hatred is found all over the world. Whether you're a Malaysian Muslim, a Pakistani Muslim, or a Lebanese Muslim, they all hate the Jews because you can't be a good Muslim unless you hate the Jews. Today, I'm going to give you a brief rundown of anti-Semitism in Australia. So within 36 hours of the October 7 massacre, pro-Palestine Aussies were out in full force at the Sydney Opera House chanting anti-Jewish slogans and burning Israeli flags. Students were setting up camp at universities and protest marches were popping up everywhere in the months that followed. Fast forward a year to the anniversary of October 7, and Tammy Resnick, a writer and policy analyst, wrote in the Jerusalem Post about how the country feels like a completely different place, and I can attest to that. She now thinks twice before leaving home wearing anything that shows her Jewish identity. And sadly, things haven't improved. Early morning on January 11, staff at the Newton Synagogue showed up to find red swastikas spray painted all over the fence. Police said they found evidence of an arson attempt and accelerant had been used, but luckily, the fire burned out on its own. Authorities are calling it an escalation of criminality. CCTV caught two unidentified suspects and police have released their images asking for the public's help. To make things worse, just an hour before the synagogue incident, police were already investigating anti-Semitic graffiti on a house in Queen's Park, along with paint splashed across 5 cars and a trailer. This is where we are. It's not getting any better. It's actually escalating. So this latest incident happened just a day after the southern Sydney synagogue got hit with pro-Hitler, pro-Islam and pro-Palestine graffiti. Now, the cops aren't ruling out a connection between these crimes, but calling this arson attempt an escalation doesn't really add up. Why? Because just over a month ago, the Adas Israel Synagogue in Melbourne was actually firebombed while people were still inside for morning prayers. One person got hurt and the damage to the building was extensive. Since October 7, 2023, anti-Semitic vandalism has been happening all over the country. We're talking cars, walls, buildings, and random public spaces. Someone even spotted a license plate that said October 7th. And believe it or not, swastikas showed up on banknotes in an ATM. Here's the scale of it. The Executive Council of Australian Jewry reported 2,062 anti-Jewish incidents between October 2023 and September 2024, compared to just 495 the previous year. Now that is a massive spike. Even New South Wales Premier Chris Minns is acknowledging it, saying there's been a massive escalation in anti-Semitic hate crime in Australia over the last 12 months. Alan Cassuto, the CEO of the Zionist Federation of Australia, spoke to ILTV and he laid it out straight. He said the Jewish community is shocked, devastated, and heartbroken, and many people are losing hope. He also pointed fingers at the government for moving away from its historical bipartisan support for Israel and backing biased UN resolutions. Meanwhile, the Australian Jewish Association didn't hold back. They posted on X saying Labor has completely lost control over the streets and the safety of the Jewish community is at risk. The Albanese government was warned repeatedly about fanning the flames of anti-Semitism, but they ignored the warnings. Assistant Commissioner Peter McKenna made a public statement saying the people who do this sort of thing should realize we'll be out in force looking for them. We will catch them and prosecute them. Now, lawmakers are stepping in too. Last January, they banned the Nazi salute and any symbol supporting hateful ideologies like swastikas. And just this past December, they proposed restricting protests near places of worship and banning flags and symbols of support for groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, along with face masks. The reasoning? Masks are not a free pass to break the law. Just last month, a 20-year-old Muslim named Muhammad Farhat was arrested for vehicular arson and anti-Semitic vandalism. But other than that, there haven't been any other major arrests, or at least that I could find. In response to the Melbourne firebombing, they launched an anti-Semitism task force. And now, counter-terrorism police are handling the investigations into the recent synagogue vandalism. So, even though they say that it's not the Jews that we hate, it's the Zionists that we hate, I have a question. If you don't hate the Jews and only hate those Jews who want a homeland, because that's what Zionism means, then why do all these people attack synagogues and random Jews? Well, you might be able to fool ordinary Westerners, but you're not going to fool a former Muslim. I know you hate the Jews. Zionism is just a modern invention. You hated them even when they lived under your rule. I made a detailed video on that. Why do Muslims hate the Jews? Go check it out. The link is in the description. So, what do you think? Will Australia be different from European countries where their governments have let anti-Semitism run through the roof? Or will Australian authorities also be helpless in curbing these rising levels of anti-Semitism? Let me know in the comments below. This is Sultan. Until next time, ta-da.